My name is Ava. Right now, I'm back in my hometown to have my baby. My husband, Jeffrey, is waiting for us at our new big apartment that we moved into for our baby. I gave birth to our much-anticipated child in my hometown, supported by my parents who were very excited to become grandparents. We named him Thomas. He's a boy. When I told Jeffrey that Thomas was born, he texted back, "Congrats on the baby. Why don't you take it easy for a bit?" His message seemed a bit short to me. I thought he would be more excited since it's his son too. Jeffrey didn't even ask for a picture of Thomas and quickly ended the conversation. I figured he must be busy with work and didn't ask him anything else. A few weeks after giving birth, I decided to return to the apartment where Jeffrey was waiting. I didn't want to take public transportation, so my dad agreed to drive me. I was excited to finally show Thomas to Jeffrey. Holding Thomas and with my dad carrying the luggage, we headed to our apartment where Jeffrey was supposed to be waiting for us. Today is Sunday, so Jeffrey should be home. He's the type to stay indoors unless he has something specific to do. As I unlocked the front door, I heard quick footsteps inside. I knew right away those weren't Jeffrey's. He doesn't usually move so fast. To my surprise, my mother-in-law rushed out from the living room. I don't get along well with my mother-in-law. She often makes passive-aggressive comments when she sees me. When I visit the in-laws with Jeffrey, and he and my father-in-law aren't around, she often says things like, "Still working full-time even though you're a wife? No one thinks a working wife is attractive. You should quit your job soon," without even knowing about my job. She also says, "Your chores are neglected because you're working. Aren't you making Jeffrey help with chores too?" A wife should help her husband with everything, from changing his clothes to other tasks, making unrealistic demands. One day, Jeffrey overheard one of her remarks, but he only said, "Both of you get along, please." He seemed to think my mother-in-law and I were having a mutual argument, not realizing I was being unfairly criticized. Jeffrey knows I'm not comfortable around his mother. I'm sure she knows I don't like her either. That's probably why she chose to be here when I returned from my hometown after childbirth. As proof, my father-in-law isn't here. He's always been considerate, saying, "Ava must be tired of seeing her in-laws all the time. We'll keep our visits to a minimum." If he were here, he would probably just look at his grandchild and then leave. However, without my father-in-law, who usually keeps my mother-in-law in check, the situation was different. My mother-in-law immediately started comparing me to my newborn, Thomas, in my arms and sneered, "I thought I'd never see a grandchild while I'm still alive, since you've been working all this time. I wonder when you had time to have a child with another man." I was taken aback. Her first words were so harsh. My dad, who was carrying the bags, wasn't at the front door yet, so to my mother-in-law, it probably looked like I had returned alone. She thought we were alone and started venting. "Mil, why would you say such a thing? This child is genuinely mine and Jeffrey's." "Oh really? Jeffrey actually had a child with you? You're not very good-looking, to say the least. You're stubborn about not becoming a housewife, even though you're married. I find it hard to believe that Jeffrey would have a child with someone as unattractive as you," she said. "Why don't you ask Jeffrey directly then? I think he'd tell you the truth." "Well, I'm asking you. Whose child is this?" I sighed. I didn't know how to talk to this clueless woman. If this continues, she might even start speaking badly about my newborn. I decided to get her to leave quickly. Mil, I'm tired from giving birth. If you want to see your grandchild, could you please come another day, preferably with my father-in-law?" "Huh, what are you talking about? My home is here." I frowned, puzzled by my Mil's statement, but she looked confident. "I'll be living in this high-rise apartment, so there's no use trying to kick me out. In fact, I'm the owner now. If you go against me, you'll be the ones who get kicked out." I sighed again. Her reasoning was so confusing that I started to question if she was actually wiser than me, despite being older. "This apartment is where Jeffrey and I originally lived. You're not paying any rent, so you can't claim to be the owner." Yet my mother-in-law remained confidently unapologetic. "The owner of this apartment is Jeffrey. He's the one who allowed me to stay here in this high-rise. He essentially transferred authority over this place to me." "Do you really think that argument holds water? The main support of this household is Jeffrey. Therefore, as Jeffrey's mother, I hold even greater authority here. A daughter-in-law and her child should occupy a lower position." My mother-in-law noticed my exasperated expression and chuckled loudly, as if she believed she had won the argument. "Daughters-in-law don't get their own rooms. If you want to stay, I might consider giving you a spot in the closet, but you'll need to pay $1,000 a month." "In that case, I'm leaving," I declared, turning to my father who was with me. "Dad, can I come back to our family home?" My father, who had heard all of my mother-in-law's cutting remarks, nodded decisively. My mother-in-law seemed completely oblivious to anyone else's presence, looking as startled as if she had been hit with a BB gun. But even with my father there, her determination showed no signs of faltering. "Going back to your parents is such a shameful thing. This is why incompetent daughters-in-law are no good. Get out of my sight with that child. I don't even know whose baby it is." My father responded calmly to my mother-in-law, who was laughing loudly, saying, "I'll be informing your husband about this." With that, he took our things and headed back to the parking lot. My mother-in-law, seeming not to fully understand the situation, yelled after us from the doorway, laughing scornfully. "What's telling my husband going to do? He'd never sympathize with a failed family like yours. He'll probably tell you to never come near our house again. Did you know my husband is a CEO? Why would he bother with a family when we don't even know what kind of job you have? We live in completely different worlds. If you understand, then just leave." Her laughter followed us all the way to the parking lot, showing little concern for the neighbors. My father and I sighed as we got into the car. "I knew you weren't getting along with your NIL, but I had no idea she was that awful," my father said. "Right? She acts so nice in front of Jeffrey and my father-in-law. I thought no one would believe me. I've only told Mom and Dad, but she's even worse than I described, isn't she?" "Yes, indeed." My father drove us back to our family home. During the drive, I called my mom. She was worried and urged me to be cautious and return safely. "Didn't seem like Jeffrey was around, but do you think he agrees with my NIL's behavior?" my dad asked. I shook my head, indicating I didn't know. I planned to contact Jeffrey soon, but before I could, Jeffrey called me. As soon as I answered, Jeffrey sounded frantic. "I heard you came back for a bit. Where did you go?" "I'm going back to my parents' home." "What?" "Jeffrey, earlier it seemed like you weren't at our apartment. Where were you?" "I went shopping because my mom asked me to. She wanted me to buy lobster for a fancy dinner tonight. I thought I sent you a message before I left, mentioning what time I'd be at the apartment today. I thought you read it." "Why did you prioritize shopping over being here?" "It was my mom's request." "You could have at least told me you were going shopping, couldn't you? Why didn't you contact me until now?" Jeffrey was at a loss for words hearing my questions. This is typical of him. He avoids getting involved in conflicts so he doesn't take anyone's side, not mine or my mother-in-law's. Maybe this time he listened to my mother-in-law who was nearby and assumed things would be fine with me. But I'm not someone who stays quiet after being treated like this. I sighed heavily. "Hey, do you know what your mother said to me?" "Huh? You told her to leave, right? She came over to help with household chores while you were away." "It was your mother who told me to get out. Specifically, she said our son isn't yours, Jeffrey, and that there's no place here for a daughter-in-law. So she'd rent out a closet for $100 a month. She said a lot of hurtful things." "Come on, adults wouldn't say such terrible things. You must be exaggerating, right?" "My dad was there too, so he heard your mother's awful remarks. I was right there listening. With 2 witnesses, do you still believe what your mother says?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it? Are you going to support me and ask your mother to leave our apartment? Are you going to make her leave?" At my firm tone, Jeffrey fell silent. He didn't deny what I said, but he also didn't seem willing to ask his mother to leave. Even though our child's paternity was questioned, Jeffrey didn't seem to fully understand the gravity of the situation. I was stunned by his lack of awareness. "I see. I'll leave then, and both you and your mother should leave too. I'll start the process to end the lease immediately." "What?" Jeffrey exclaimed in shock from the other end of the phone. "Did you forget that the apartment is in my name? And haven't you told your mother that I earn more than you? She keeps pressuring me to quit working and be a housewife. I've had enough. How long will you let your wife endure such verbal abuse?" "Wait, please wait. We finally got this high-rise apartment. Don't just end the lease like that. It's a waste." "A waste? Is that all you can say? Do you think you can keep living there after evicting the landlord, which is me? I didn't evict you. You're allowing your mother, who kicked me out, to roam free. Essentially, you're letting her drive me and our child away. I'm not generous enough to rent out my place to strangers." I ended the call, disgusted by Jeffrey's indecisiveness and his failure to protect his family. If in the future my mother-in-law says something hurtful about our child, Thomas, I bet Jeffrey would just brush it off with a casual calm down. I can't accept a man who would let his child be hurt like that. My job is flexible. I can work from anywhere with my computer, and my income is stable. I can take care of Thomas by myself. Actually, I don't need Jeffrey, especially if it means dealing with his irritating mother because of him. He doesn't strive for a promotion or further qualifications. He just relies on my earnings. My dad dropped me off at my parents' place and mentioned he had somewhere to go, likely to see Jeffrey's dad. My mother-in-law seems unaware of the mistake she made. She didn't even know that my father is also a business tycoon, as he and Jeffrey's dad are close through their roles as CEOs. They introduced their children to each other, resulting in Jeffrey and I getting married. It seems my mother-in-law either didn't care or wasn't informed, as she acted like she had no idea my dad was a CEO too. Her actions belittled both me and my dad reported it to Jeffrey's dad. Jeffrey's dad, unlike my mother-in-law, is sensible and decisive. He rightly scolded her for her behavior, as my dad told me later. Upon hearing this, Jeffrey's dad immediately summoned my mother-in-law and Jeffrey. He had her repeat the hurtful remarks she made about me and gave her a piece of his mind. Jeffrey tried to argue he wasn't present, but he was reprimanded for his initial attitude. The next day, my father-in-law came to my family's home with a box of candies as an apology. However, I couldn't bring myself to forgive them, so I declined the candies and asked them to leave. During this time, I terminated the lease of our apartment. Jeffrey and my mother-in-law needed to move out by the end of the month, so they went back to their family home. They kept apologizing, but I pointed out, "You're only apologizing now that you realize the consequences for yourselves," and sent them away. Meanwhile, my father-in-law remarked, "Your abusive language towards the daughter of another company's president may have cost us a big deal. I don't want a wife who lacks common sense like you," hinting at possibly serving her divorce papers. Jeffrey, who worked at his father's company, was warned, "We can't keep someone without ambition here. If you don't show improvement in 3 months, you'll either be demoted or transferred to a different position." Consequently, he's now focused on studying hard to obtain a certification. However, starting from scratch is challenging for Jeffrey, who had relied on my earnings. I receive regular updates from my father-in-law about their situation. My mother-in-law continues to plead with him not to divorce her, showing no effort to find a job and hasn't even unpacked her belongings from the apartment. Jeffrey, struggling with his studies, is now seeking help from colleagues who already have certifications, despite feeling overwhelmed. "I'm now considering giving you divorce papers and I've already filled out my section." When I called Jeffrey, he picked up after 3 rings. "Hello, Ava. Are you coming back?" "Why would you say that? You need to leave by the end of the month, remember? There's no coming back from this." "Did you really terminate the apartment lease?" "I was the one who was told to leave, remember?" "I'm so sorry. Please, let's live together again." "But don't you have that 3-month deadline? Either you'll be demoted or you'll have to change jobs. I can't keep supporting you. I can't see a future living with you anymore. I'll leave the divorce papers with your dad. Fill out your part." "Why divorce? I didn't ask you to leave." I sighed deeply. "It's true that you didn't kick me out of the apartment, it was your mother. But I'm upset that you didn't stand up for me against her. More importantly, the reason I can't see a future with you anymore is because you never once asked about our child. You didn't seem concerned about what our child looks like or how it felt to be told he might not be yours. When I told you about the birth, you didn't show any interest in our child. I don't feel any sense of responsibility from you as a father. That's why I can't imagine raising a child together with you." "What? Can't we ever reconcile?" I hung up immediately at his words. I don't want a father for our child who shows no interest in him. As planned, I gave the divorce papers to my father-in-law. After Jeffrey completed his part, the papers were returned to me and I promptly submitted them to the city hall. In the end, my mother-in-law got a divorce, and Jeffrey seemed to have been relocated to a place similar to Nebraska, moving from one relative's house to another. Currently, with the support of my parents and others, I'm giving all my love and attention to Thomas.